Again, Inclusivity Forward Part Deuce. I am Julia Loving. Today we will be exploring race, culture at Lindy Hop. What does it mean in 2019? I have an exceptional panel here.
Hey guys, so I just wanted to remind everyone real quick that downstairs right now currently we would like to hold our talk on inclusivity and how to move forward. So if you're wrapping up,
that's my son.
Go ahead and head downstairs and join that community talk because it's very essential and important. If you're just getting here and eating, I can understand that. But if you're just doing like socializing and chilling, definitely come downstairs and enjoy that with us. Very crucial to this weekend. All right, thanks guys.
Thank you, Brandon. Just to let you know, that is my son. Okay, yes, and this is what we call a communal circle. It's a safe space to share and learn about various things. But tonight we just actually will be dealing with race and culture. I do have an exceptional panel. I have Latasha Barnes. I have Taryn Newborn. I have Shisoma Salamani. Got it? All right. I have Shelby Johnson. No.
Yeah,
Johnson? Okay, L. Johnson. That's what I was getting at.
L. Johnson.
And I have my son coming somewhere. And we also have Joshua Clean, and we have Brandon Barker. He should be on his way. Okay, so thank you all for coming out and sharing this day. But I'm going to allow my panelists to actually just give a little brief introduction to themselves and their role within the Lindy Hop community. I guess we can start with Joshua. Well, actually, here, since Taryn has it. Okay.
Hi, my name is Taryn Newborn. I'm from Atlanta by way of Memphis. And I am a vocalist and band leader here in the scene. You may see me at various major events throughout the year at the registration desk, and I'm on the safety team. I'm also Joshua and Jonas's mom.
Latasha Barnes from DC/New York. I am an educator and dancer in the scene, and you probably see me everywhere being goofy and silly. And serious mostly.
And she just got her master's degree.
Yes.
My name is Joshua McLean. I'm an educator and dancer in the scene. I'm also artistic director of Hello Black Lindy Hop and a Frankie Manning Foundation ambassador.
Yeah, Frankie Manning Foundation ambassador as well. Sorry.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Shelby Johnson. I currently live in Dallas, Texas. I'm also a dance educator and dancer, now organizer this year, which is weird, and DJ. And I'm also a Frankie Manning ambassador.
Hi, I'm Shisoma Salamani. I am from I'm technically from two places. I live in Cleveland, Ohio, but I'm also from Lusaka, Zambia. And so that gives you a little bit of information about my role in the scene. I kind of bring a little bit of the American, African-American, African perspective from Africa. Yes. How many times can I say the word Africa in this sentence? And I'm a Frankie Manning Foundation ambassador.
And we have Brandon.
Hi, I'm Brandon Barker. I'm also a Frankie Manning ambassador. Dancer, yes. Let's see. I started Lindy hopping at the end of 2013. And it's been 6 years now. Oh, okay, yeah. And I'm from Harlem, New York.
And you're a junior in college.
Right.
At University of Massachusetts.
Rising junior at the University of Massachusetts. And we're studying dance. Yeah.
Okay, so we have our panels. I guess I didn't tell you all about myself. I am actually a school teacher. I'm a school librarian. Yeah. And And I also teach Africana studies in the evening in a high school for young adults that are actually on their last leg in possibilities with regards to their education. Many of them are struggling students. But I also am an event organizer. I have my partner. Where's my partner, Ronald Jones? We actually started doing, hi Ronald, Ronald's back there today. But we started doing events in Harlem once a month. And we just held a huge party in Harlem to celebrate the life and legacies of Norma Miller and Frankie Manning for Frankie Manning's 105th birthday. But of course, we had Norma passing, so we did a celebration of life for her as well. And what was good about that was that people came from all around. It was a part of the Swedes in New York City weekend, but people came from all around to celebrate these two amazing people. So that's what I do.
Tell about the history of your last name. That's important.
Okay. Well, I am a Loving. I'm a part of this landmark Supreme Court case, Loving versus Virginia, which basically, that prior to 1967, interracial marriage, when I say interracial marriage, I'm saying whites and non-whites, okay, it was illegal in the United States in about 27 states. Most of the states that were in rebellion, most of the states that were a part of the Civil War, those states, those were Jim Crow laws. My cousin Richard and his wife Mildred couldn't get married in Virginia, so they went to DC to get married. And when they came back home, they were basically arrested because they had violated Virginia's state laws against amalgamation, or what you would call miscegenation, mixing of races. Plus, it was illegal to cohabitate. That means to live with someone that was white or non, or colored. So they took this case with the help of the American Civil Liberties Union, they were able to bring the case to the to the Supreme Court, and they heard it in 1967. Now, we got to think about time. We're not talking about so long ago. My oldest brother was born in 1964. So it's my lifespan. It's not my grandparents. It's not my, great-grandparents. These are my generation. So, we still have a lot of things to deal with regards to race, okay, and equality. So that's why we're here today, okay? And I was asked by Judy Pritchard to respond, just giving you a recap of why this was set up. Judy Pritchard asked me, based on a question by an event organizer in Greece, how they could actually make their local scenes more inclusive. And I said, I probably could have just gave answers of how to, what I would do, but I said, what, let me phrase some questions. And I came up with these 21 questions up there. So these are the questions. They're available on the Frankie Manning Foundation website. Or you could just Google Julia Loving and type in inclusivity. And these are some of the questions. Like, do I actively recognize the Lindy Hop is a Black art form? Is that recognition and acceptance represented in the way that I run dance events, classes, and overall dance scenes? Am I comfortable dealing with or discussing race matters? If not, am I in a partnership with someone else that is? Do I look for, consider, or hire qualified bands or orchestras that are led by or include Black musicians and singers? Do I look for, consider, or hire qualified Black instructors on all levels? Do I look for, consider, or hire qualified Black DJs for my events or to cover band breaks? So there's so many questions out of the 21, but those are the ones I read. So if you want to see it again, you can actually find it on the Frankie Manning website. So since our theme today is race, culture, and Lindy Hop, I wanted to see what people here that were here last year actually went back home. Who was here last year? And who was actually responsible for their local scenes? Yeah? Okay, a few people. Did you go back and do any of the things that we discussed? And even in the panel, this is a time to add some of the things that you may have actually went back to improve upon or to see if there's changes within the communities that you actually live in. Okay, so we can share that out. Anyone wants to try? And I always see Peter. I think I quoted inclusivity to you one day on Facebook. So if you want to share out some of that as well. Okay, so we can start with the panel first. Whoever has the mic, yeah.
In Seattle, we recently had several meetings where we got together. The first meeting, the way it started is we got a bunch of people together in a room. We brought in some experts to speak on consent issues. We also brought in some experts to speak on race issues. And we just talked things out, and we had that safe space. We also had some mediators, because some of the things that we were talking about were also intertwined with interpersonal issues, just with people who've been in the Seattle scene at the same time. And sometimes because of these personal issues, it got sticky. So we had those mediators there, and we ended up having a really nice conversation, or a nice resolution to those conversations, in which that we made pledges to acknowledge the harms that have been done, as opposed to putting blame on, like assigning blame. We really just focused on acknowledging harm, and we worked on the what do we do in a later meeting. To be honest, I have not myself been around for some of those later meetings because of traveling and all of that. But
Well,
that
that's
is
a good
what
thing,
we
that
have
means
done.
you being hired,
Yeah.
okay?
Exactly.
Okay, so that's a part of those questions up there, thank you. Yeah. Brandon, you have anything that you want to?
I guess a goal of mine I was thinking about last year was, bringing Lindy Hop to Harlem, or just to like younger Black kids, in terms of making it inclusive and open for them. And I was able to get a good platform to kind of do that, which is actually starting, I believe, next week, where it's a developmental educational learning training. So it's essentially we do this training for 3 days, right? And then we're certified to teach at different schools, and they can put the Lindy Hop program in the vendors and then choose those vendors to put at different schools. And I wouldn't be the highest authority there, obviously, right? I'm in a company and I have a boss in that company, but like just those kids being able to see the Black dancer, the other Black kids that are within those schools, I think is really important, So I'm happy that platform came about. I also, talked to Sam, my mentor. A lot of that, the places he teaches at with kids, like coming in and doing a showcase, and with Julia and her kids at her school. So, I feel like there's been progress.
Tasha, hello again. Just thinking about it, I was like, oh, right, I gotta make notes because I can't remember everything. So, the largest of which, well, actually, I can't even categorize them that way. They've all had their significance. Concluding my thesis research for my master's degree in ethnochoreology, African American studies, and performance studies with NYU, a lot of the interviews that will be released probably later in the year when NYU gives me the go-ahead. There's a archival website that I've created that literally is showing geographically the impact and spread of African American art forms and the tradition bearers and cultural surrogate members who have established programs or established communities that are in service to these dances, as well as discussing some of the appropriative things that have happened on the back end of people trying to spread these dance forms in a healthy and including way, based on the elders that they were working with at the time to bring those dances to those areas. A lot of what has come about from that as well for the Black community has been acknowledging themselves, their own absence from these art forms, these cultural products, and beginning to acknowledge the work that needs to go into undoing a lot of our colonized mindsets and conditioned understandings about how we can or should not participate in our own art forms, which is a little bit deeper work that needs to happen for the Black community in itself. It's not something that anybody else needs to do for us. That's things that we need to show up and do on our own. And how to begin the process of doing that work and helping others to undo that work to move towards greater participation, because that's the only way that things are going to continue to change. One of the most unexpected things was moving to being a part of the Lincoln Center Midsummer Night Swing Advisory Panel. Getting to be in a room with other dancers and other people who have done this for many, many years, but of course being that loud, brash newbie who's like, no, that sucked. Bring these people.
Right, that's the power of persuasion. You have to be able to do that.
And so taking that time to advocate and getting the ear of the program director for that overall and convincing her to take a chance on a group of dancers named Hello Black Lindy Hop to bring them out to support a black band leader in his band, Charles Turner and Uptown Swing, which if you're in New York, July 6th. And then in addition, having that spiral off to Lincoln Center Education, requesting a workshop from Hello Black Lindy Hop for the families so that the parents can get more involved in the community aspect of Lindy Hop and get their children involved to continue to perpetuate the legacy of Lindy Hop continuing to grow in the black communities in New York. Also, stepping out a little bit more and sharing Lindy Hop in the urban dance community. I've always kind of been that bridged person, but presenting myself more in the battle scene has brought it up again to be something that's even more shareable. So last year at Summer Dance Forever, it's a great event in Amsterdam. If you're looking for crossover understandings about these different communities, go to Amsterdam this summer. Well, maybe not because that's during Uptown Swing Out. So go to Uptown Swing Out. And then just look at Summer Dance Forever stuff on YouTube. But,
And she won.
Yes, she won.
Yes, she did.
So, yes, thanks, Peter. Yes, that was a World Championship battle. That was the first one of the year. And I was able to share at Lindy Hop at that event, and then I'll also be sharing Lindy Hop again this summer, the partnered version of Lindy Hop, not just solo jazz. I'll be teaching by myself. And I'll be sharing Lindy Hop as a part of that event as well in Japan when we go and do that in November. And there's another organization that's developed out of all of this collaborative effort and understanding and wanted to put people of color forth, most specifically women of color, and that is the Nefer Global Movement. If you follow me on Instagram, this is quite literally an effort amongst African American women to promote and celebrate other African American women. That's where it is right now. It will expand to be other women of color, but right now it is African American women who are in dance supporters, and working to make sure that we are represented in those cultures and communities. So it's me and jazz and house and hip hop and other women in jazz and house and hip hop and theater and people who are in the commercial industry as well. So it's bridging those gaps that many of you who might participate in the urban dance communities know to be a thing that has continued to keep us kind of at odds with one another. But it's continuing that work that we were talking about, or that I was mentioning about undoing even these conditioned mindsets that we have in the dance communities about how we can and should be shared with particular styles or other groups of people. So yeah, it's been a busy year.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. So this year has been a supremely busy year for me. I have partnered with a foundation called How Big Is Your Dream? It's a youth arts foundation that not only teaches the arts, talking about, because I live in Atlanta, it's just the other Hollywood, the film industry, music, dance, drama, if it's art, you name it, we want to help kids. But it's not just about the art itself, it's about sustainability and not saying that, okay, that's what's your plan B after your art, is keeping your art sustainable. And it's run by a guy who drums for everybody, from 2 Chainz to Future to Peebo Bryson, to name, yeah, everybody, literally is everybody. And he's also the Grammy Board president for Georgia and Alabama. And through him, he's asked me to institute a program called Brand Ambassadors. And with that, I have a platform to introduce more social dancing to our community, and teaching I'm putting together a curriculum to teach the parallels of African American dance and African American music, African American fashion, just the culture, and how it parallels with how it's moved and how it's inspired the entire world. And also on a social level, bringing back social dancing. So from Lindy Hop all the way through hand dancing and two-step and, you know, what Lindy Hop has become, you know, and to institute that, because there's way too much music not to dance to. It really frustrates me when I go somewhere and there's so much danceable music, nobody's dancing. And also, since last year, I don't know who y'all told or what y'all did, but my phone has been ringing. I have been getting gigs, seriously. Thank you. Yeah, I've done DCLX. I have done, I'll be coming back here to do Sweet Mo. I'm doing, yes, I'm doing, you know, I'll be at Backroom Speakeasy in New York and you know, just a lot of different places. I got invited to Fringe Fest for next year in Scotland. So, I know. So yes, I want to come to your city. And I'm cost effective. I will save you some money.
Since last year, I think one thing I took away from this panel, we got talked about how a lot of times, like, a lot of women of color in the dance scene, like specifically African American women, don't get asked to dance as much. And that was something I actually sought out to do more, was asking more black women at the dances in Dallas to dance. And the crazy thing happened, other dancers started asking more of them to dance more often. And it was just one of the craziest things. Since then, I formed a wonderful relationship with the Austin Swing Dance Syndicate. They dedicated the Austin Lindy Exchange, takes place the weekend before Thanksgiving every year, to Frankie Manning, the Frankie Manning Foundation. So a couple months before that, I went and did a talk about me being an ambassador and about history in Lindy Hop and how to push more history forward and how to be more inclusive to people of color and African Americans. Then I did a talk at the Austin Lindy Exchange as part of a fundraiser for the Frankie Manning Foundation. I've also been able to, I work with Alex, I pretty much advise him on a lot of cultural aspects and things with the Dallas Swing Dance Society to interject more of that. And y'all did a dedication to Norma Miller over Memorial Day weekend, which we never had anything happen in my 5 years of being in Dallas. And so that was something I was excited to see. I've been teaching. I had the pleasure of teaching at Classic City Swing in Athens, Georgia last year, and I had the pleasure of teaching at Camp Jitterbug this year. So starting to teach more and be able to just share more cultural stories and more historical stories within the classroom to students. And a lot of people have been responding, even in our local scene, about a lot of history that I cover and talk about. So that's what I've been up to.
So I'm in academia, and so my vantage point has been from that side. I have a course called Pop Lock and Lindy Hop, and so it catalogs African American social dances starting in Africa. This last year, I had an opportunity to expand that offering, and I had Kyle Dixon come to my class and talk to my students. And my school is a small liberal arts university, and we have about 25% of our student body is diverse. But my class was about like 80% of people of color. So partially because of the draw of the name of the class and the instructor, and so I used that platform to invite those students into the Lindy Hop scene a little bit more. And Kyle and I actually offered a Lindy Hop workshop at the university. So those students not only took part in activities during the class time, but then they came outside and started to participate a little bit more. So it was really nice to see those students get engaged and connected, and they were really excited about being able to participate in something that was connected to them in a way that they didn't realize before. I've had some really interesting opportunities, not just with Lindy Hop, but with Zambian dancing. And so if we were to expand to other social dances within the swing world, I actually taught an elective with Bobby White at Cowbow this year. And it was a wonderful opportunity to kind of talk about African dancing and Balboa, but then extrapolated out swing dances. And so we were able to talk about the connection there, and that was brilliant. And I have an opportunity at Great Lakes Balboa Escape to offer a Zambian dancing elective. And then once again, I always talk about the connection. We do African dancing, but then we talk about the makeup of the steps and the connection that we have in Lindy. So I try to sneak it in there, even in other social dances. So, yeah.
So we are missing 2 panelists, but they sent me emails because they certainly wanted to share what they're doing. So Vivian Madrid from Rhode Island Swings. Providence Swings, I'm sorry. Right, Providence Swings. She sent me, it says, we evaluate locations for classes based on accessibility by a diverse population. We are mindful of pricing so that more people are able to access and enjoy the dance. Affordability is a big, issue within a lot of our communities. She said, I hesitate to say that we embedded cultural history within every class because the dance itself is a living and breathing culture that we have borrowed. But we do ensure that the history of what we do is shared with our community. So I want to thank Vivian for sending. She also spoke on some gender-neutral language. They're educating students on the importance of respecting a person's chosen role. As an organization, we make efforts to seek out diverse musicians and artists. We have ability to host regional events. We do this by outreach and creating a dialogue. This is important to me because there are many artists out there that may not be necessarily seen or have the opportunity to access our communities. And Jennifer Soden from Brooklyn Swings, she sent in action on inclusion. Welcome those who stand out at dances. When you look different or you're from another ethnic group and you don't feel like you fit in, she's actually made sure that her DJs and even her teachers are asked to make contact with these people, to new people that they have not recognized or have not seen at Brooklyn Swings. So they call it welcome here and welcome back. And they introduce themselves and ask the people to dance. And that's a big part of it. So if you think, there's a quote by Veronica Myers. She says, diversity is asking a person to come to the dance, but inclusivity is asking the person to dance. Because we can ask and invite people to an event, but they may sit off on the side and not get a dance at all the whole night. That's boring, that's not good. Will they be back? Probably not. So, that inclusivity part is to ask someone to dance. Tip of the night. They make announcements, 1 to 3 sentences about the history, and it can include musicians, dances, culture, historic racism, people, venues, and more. She also said it was important to actually advertise it on websites. So many of us have social media. Visual representation. On their website, Brooklyn Swings, it has a history and old vintage images. So thank you for sharing this via email. So now we're going to open it up to our communal circle. Anyone here want to share some of the things that they've actually done this year based on what we did with Inclusivity? Kyle, did you do something? That's what I do with my students. Did you do something? Did you want to say something?
I mean, not
Spotlight.
in our scene, but me and
I see a
Alexis,
Facebook post.
me and Alexis, we were just
Dang.
at TSU, Texas Southern University, HBCU, and we taught, it was basically all kids of color, and we taught them how to Lindy Hop, and it was like most of their first time dancing, so.
San Francisco.
Oh, yeah. We also taught in San Francisco not too long ago, earlier this year, to kids as well. We held a youth program there too.
And Baltimore.
Oh, Lord, have mercy.
That's right.
And we'll be teaching
Spotlight.
at Camp Hollywood this year too. So,
Okay.
that's a big one.
I do. This is important because, I'm getting old. Like I tell my students, I'm retiring in 6 years. Now it's up to you. You're going to have to learn how to vote. You're going to have to learn how to drive. You have to do a lot of things. So, the ball's in your court, Kyle. Okay? Anyone?
You did stuff at home too.
Huh?
You did stuff at home.
Oh,
It's
man.
fine.
I've been doing other stuff like outside of like the Lindy Hop community, like trying to make line dances and stuff like that. So I also teach that to like youth. We were also we were in
And
Houston-
adults.
And adults, it's true. We were also in Houston. So part of being in Houston, we were at ISDC and we taught a youth program. We talked to the youth program there too. I taught my line dancing, me and Alexis also taught Lindy Hop. And these kids, they do like a different style of dancing. Like some of them do Chicago stepping, Houston two-step. So this was all of their first time doing Lindy Hop. Okay, I think that's it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Inclusivity recap. Do you want to share anything, Peter?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Time will get that.
No.
I just want to bust around too.
It's Boss Kyle around day, I guess.
Honoring Norma.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. In honor of Norma, we'll boss you around a little bit. Not a ton of new things from last year necessarily. Is D in the house? Is D around? I think I fooled D because I was like, hey D, I'll meet you after dinner and we'll practice this thing, and then I came here instead. So I think I should. I think she's resting. She's resting. Okay, good. Anyways, D might be better to talk about some of this because she was a big part of it. But we had a great experience in Minneapolis, which is where I'm from. So I run classes there, but I don't run the whole scene. I just run some classes, and then there's people who run dance, and there's other people who run classes. So I'm part of the pie there. One of our community members, she's a person of color, she's mixed race, part African American. She posted on Facebook basically just saying, the brief version of it was like a discomfort in the scene, feeling like not super comfortable, not always welcome, just posting like I'm not super comfortable, it's not always a super safe space for me. Kind of laying it out there, being very honest. And it sent a little ripple through our scene for sure. The white people were like, oh God, I'm gonna die. And then the black people were like, yes, me too, I feel like she does. And, so it was a little tricky, everyone was very emotional for a minute, but I think what was great was that what came out of it was a community forum, and Dee actually stepped up and organized it. Dee is the dancer of color, and she's been dancing a long time, she's really experienced, and she totally gets what this girl was saying. So what happened is, we got about, I think it was, how many people, maybe 60, 70, I don't know, a good number of people came and hung out, and then they had a panel, kind of like this, it was a panel, and the people of color were on the panel. And everyone else, like the white folks, which is the predominant people in the scene, were kind of in the audience. And it was mainly the people on the panel speaking, sharing their experiences. Dee was moderating. And then we were just listening. And so the way it sort of went down, and it was tricky. There was some tricky moments. People felt like, oh, maybe you're blaming me for something unfairly, or let me just explain myself for this or that. And what is nice is what came out of it was this little forum, a little bit like what Joshua was talking about. And Dee really set it up, credit to Dee, where the panel shared their experiences. People kind of heard that, we're like, okay, cool, we took a little break, and then we came back and the panel said, here's some things that we think might be helpful to make us feel better, because we're the ones who are feeling this, so here's what we might suggest out there. And Dee is also a teacher, and so she was super organized. She's like, we're gonna pick 4 points, and they need to be actionable points, and they need to be things that people will experience. And we have them right here. So came up with these 4 points that were picked from the panelists' sort of suggestions, and the community kind of voted on it. And I think the idea was to have a little bit of community buy-in. Like, okay, you say you want to do these things? All right, here's 4 things you can do. The 4 that we settled on were pay attention and listen to people of color and their experiences. And I think Dee was like, I don't know about that one, because it wasn't something that maybe the people of color would experience, but it's a good thing to do. So we were going to pick 3, but we picked 4 to add that one in there. Another one we picked, which was a little bit more, would be explicitly experienced by someone else, was reach out to a variety of people, or reach out to people explicitly different from yourself. So if you see someone, don't just dance with people just like you. Make it a point to dance with someone who is different from you, and it doesn't have to be just racially, just somehow a little different. And what we thought there was that people who might feel not super welcome, they might actually feel slightly different. They might get asked to dance more often, they just make more connections. Another thing along the same lines was extend an invitation. So that meant don't just ask someone to dance, but say like, hey, we're gonna do a non-dance thing. Would you like to join us for this non-dance thing? And we just said like, we all sort of agreed like, we're gonna try and do that a little more often to people that you don't already know. And the last thing, very topical, is attend events that engage with the historical roots of Lindy Hop and Black culture today, and share conversations about those events. So specifically, like, not just going to events in general, but really specifically things like this right here. Like, if there's one of these happening at a Lindy Hop event, don't go buy a beer and hang out in your room.
Right.
Come to this instead, and get your shit together. Come to this. So like, it'd be great if you can come to it. And I think that's a really good one because like, it's another one where people can see you here, and you showing up here, literally showing up, and I thought that would maybe make some help. So that was a really good thing that happened, and I think there was fallout from it. People were sort of like sorting themselves out, seeing how they felt. I think the difficulties, of course, like, is everybody following through on all 4 of those things? I don't know. I don't know that is like, I don't know that the follow through is super strong. But I was very proud of our scene. I thought that thing went really well. Is Dee in the house? Dee rocked it. You did a great job. Dee, do you want to say anything about that?
I just came in at the end of what you
I just talked about the forum that you ran and then the 4 points that we sort of agreed upon.
Yeah, I think that like.
Take the mic out.
Oh, I don't entirely need a mic.
Doesn't matter.
I get loud, y'all. I think that the follow through is tough, kind of on both sides, and I tried to address that in the forum. That was kind of the point of having both parts of the community together. There was that I wanted the people of color to like be able to recognize when things were being attempted, because when you're coming from like 2 different sides, it's difficult to know when somebody's trying to do something or have done it when you're looking at it from your own perspective. So I was trying to like get us to come to kind of an acknowledgement as a community, a la the classroom. I teach 4th grade. And if we all agree on this thing together, then we can notice each other trying. And I think that the follow through has kind of it's been a little tough on both sides. It's hard to like get the POCs to be recognizing when the thing is happening. And so we've had some continuation of talks about that. And I think like we're kind of planning some gatherings where we can like open up our own forum and discuss that together, see like what has changed and what kind of steps can we take. And then also, I think that it's hard on the other side of the people in the community to like make sure that things are happening without that like weird feeling of like guilt or burden or bad person coming in, but just making an honest effort consistently. I think that the follow through on both of those 2 sides is still kind of tough, but when we don't have precedence, then it's hard for people to just know that they're making the right choices or the choices that they want to make at that time. But I think it was a good step. I think we need to just revisit it.
Yeah, for sure. Can I?
Thank you.
Yeah, and I should share like from like the white side of things. I can give you a little briefing. I think that I've had many conversations with people. I think the thing about when you're, white in general, you don't have to feel white very often, and when you're black, you probably feel black a lot. And so when this thing comes up, it surfaces like your whiteness as like a group identity, and people, it's just not comfortable. White people, I think, just don't do that as often. I don't feel white that often, except in very specific contexts. I feel like, oh, just me, an individual in the world. And so I think that's something that the scene struggled with when this thing came up. And I talked to many different dancers, and the great thing is, everyone I talked to, they were really concerned about it, and they really wanted to do good. And several of them were like, am I doing bad? Should I quit? I'm really stressed out. And it's, if it's sort of like a white fragility thing, which is not to insult anybody at all. It is just to say that like when you're unfamiliar with feeling like a group, it feels really hard, and like black people are used to it, so they're better at it. So I had many talks with different white dancers who just were like uncomfortable or unsure. Am I totally messing up? And I was trying to sort of just encourage them, like, keep dancing, keep acting with your best intentions, and think of the 4 points that could help, but like I think the intention is worth something. It's not the end all be all, but if you have that good intention, that's great, and to try to sort of share that. And I mention that because so many of us in the room are white people, and if you encounter something this or you have this talk, it can be tricky. You can feel worried or you can feel powerless, and I think I would advise us to just try to, rather than avoiding the awkwardness of doing the wrong thing, go ahead and give it a shot to do something, even if you're awkward, and then you can apologize if it goes badly. But I think to take that step is something that I think people were like, maybe we'll try to do that, and then we're trying. And aside from that, in Minneapolis, at my Uptown Swing class, and actually also at our sort of local Lindy Hop dance rhythm induction on Mondays, we made a big celebration about Black History Month. So we use that as a springboard just to talk about Black artists, Black dancers, Black musicians, and they had a little projector screen at the dance. They did little trivia things. It was like a little stressful for people in some way, but it was great. Everyone was super into it. Sometimes like too much, but it was great. It was great to do it, but it was an awkward first start to the thing, and that was really, really good. And we do that at Uptown Swing every year, and we try to really make a thing of it, posting Facebook things and just saying like, it's Black History Month, and as we say every time, like, if you like Lindy Hop, you like Black history. And I like to say that just so people just have to put those two together. So that was the thing we did this year as a little bit more of a purposeful thing. I think the rest is kind of ongoing.
Thank you so much.
A question for me maybe, or just to
No,
or just introduce
say
myself?
if you wanted to mention anything that you've been doing locally.
Okay. All right. Well, my name is Samuel Coleman, and I'm from New York City, and I think this is my 8th year, maybe, I believe. I went to Harangue in 2011 as a Frankie Manning ambassador, and that year was the first year they started that program, and they didn't know exactly what they were going to, to do. This was just going to be like a one shot, but it continued. And so I went outside the country to find out about actually stuff that was actually happening in my country, which was really funny. So that was actually my first camp. So when I went to Sweden for Harangue, that's when I found out about Beantown, and I found out about other camps in my country. Because they would have an information table that's common, for events, and it would be flooded with, stuff. And then, of course, I met other people that had been here before, including teachers from back at home, Abida and Michael and Nathan. And, so they told me about these camps. And so then in 2012, I came here for the first time. And I've been coming ever since, and then bringing people with me. So I think this is like my 5th or 6th year bringing students with me. I had been teaching in my community before I went to Harangue, but when I went to Harangue, I really, it was like my hair was on fire. Like I went back really with a world view of this dance as opposed to like a local view. And and I saw really how, I've always loved dance, and actually dance has actually really saved my life. The arts has saved my life, and I believe in its power to heal, people. So I use it, just to just bring joy and life, and and a community of people. And so when I went back home, I went back with a plan of, things what I was going to do. And the first thing that I did for a whole year, or maybe more than that, I taught classes for free to anybody that wanted them. And then I worked in some community centers in Harlem, and I worked with young people. Some programs that had troubled youth, but I offered this dance to them as a way to give back, and then I just kept going. I have a community class that I teach once a year that I've been teaching for over 8 years now, and I teach every single Monday unless I'm away or unless if it's on holiday. And so that, that's going strong. This is one of my students right here. Yeah, so that's going strong. And one of the things that I really enjoy about it is an open class, which can be very challenging because I have people that have been studying with me for 5+ years, but then I also allow people to come in off the street, never had any type of dance class in their life, and say, oh, I have 2 left feet. But over time, I've found a way to make it work. And, and I give people that's never had a dance class before the basics and something to go home with if they never come back and they're going back home wherever they're from. And then I give things to my regulars, something to challenge them. And I guess I'm doing okay because they keep, my regulars keep coming back, every week. But I basically, went back home and, I had like a plan of things that I wanted to do. Basically of things that I saw a need and things that needed to be done in my community that wasn't already being done, even in the dance scene, in the swing dance scene. So I went back and, and I've just been doing those things. I've been the kind of person that, like, if I see, something that needs to be done, I'm not going to necessarily wait, for somebody to do it for me. I'm going to do it, instead of, I'm going to be the, solution. So, and that's really been working. And I just, and also, in my journey, it's been really special to meet all of these people that's on this panel along the way. And ever since that we connected, we stay connected. And it's just amazing just to see the things that's happening in all of our communities. And we continue to inspire each other, and it's just awesome. So, it's just thank you. Yeah, I don't know what,
Thank you. And that's my dance instructor. Thank you, Sandra. All right. So the next thing, this is going to be an activity. So I'm going to need about 25 people lined up right here. Those people sitting right there, since you decided to sit there, you're going to be a part of the activity. All right. So this is what we call a privilege walk. Everybody stand up. This is all of you. All of you. You're going to move the chair. So the goal is to be honest, absolutely honest with yourselves, okay? I'm going to ask some questions. If you're going to step forward or you're going to step back, okay? Based on your answer. So just move up maybe about 1 foot, okay? Okay. So this is what you call a privilege walk. Some people in the world are more privileged than others. Those are blessings, of course. But I want to actually teach you all a little bit about empathy, looking at other people. So, if English is your first language, take 1 step forward. If your ancestors were forced to come to the United States, not by choice, step backward. If your primary ethnic identity is American, take 1 step forward. If you grew up in an urban setting, take 1 step backward. If you've never been stopped by the police, step forward. If you've never been the only person of your race in a room, take a step forward.
Sorry, say that again.
Okay, did I read it right? If you've never been the only person, if you've ever been the only person of your race in a room, step forward. Step backward. Sorry. Okay. I'm messing this up. I'm going back and forth to the questions. Okay. All right. If your primary ethnic identity is an American, take 1 step forward. Did I say that one? Yes. If you were ever called names because of your race, class, ethnicity, step 1 forward, step back. If you were ashamed or embarrassed of your clothes, your house, or your car, take 1 step back. If one or both of your parents were white-collar professionals, doctors, lawyers, take one step forward. If you were raised in an area where there was prostitution, drug activity, take one step back. If you've ever tried to change your appearance, mannerisms, or behavior to avoid being judged, ridiculed, take one step back. You gotta be honest. Okay. If you studied the culture of your ancestors in elementary school, take one step forward. If you went to school speaking a language other than English, take one step back. If there were more than 50 books in your house when you grew up, take one step forward. If you ever had to skip a meal or were hungry because there was not enough money to buy food when you were growing up, take one step back. If you were ever taken to an art gallery or a play by your parents when you were young, take one step forward. If one of your parents was unemployed or laid off, not by choice, take one step back. If your health insurance, if you have health insurance, take one step forward. If your family ever had to move because they had to run from vigilantism or racism, take one step back. Gosh, Lord, you're gonna go out the door. So, if you were told that you were beautiful, smart, and capable by your parents, take one step forward. If you were ever discouraged from academics or jobs because of race, class, or ethnicity, gender, or sexual orientation, take one step back.
There's no more room.
Oh gosh. If you were encouraged to attend college by your parents, take one step forward. If you have a disability, take one step backward. If your family owned the house where you grew up, take one step forward. All right, it's only a couple more. If you saw members of your race, ethnic group, gender, or sexual orientation portrayed on television in degrading roles, take one step back. If you own a car, take one step forward. If you own a car, take one step forward. If you were ever offered a good job because of your association with a friend or a family member, take one step forward. Right. If you were paid less, treated less fairly because of race or your ethnicity, take one step back. Okay. So I'm going to leave it here. So the questions I had, let me give you all some questions. Those of you that are here. What did you feel like being in front of this group? Or in the back or in the middle? How do you all feel now that you see this disparity? So those of you that are closer to me, basically a little bit more privileged because you've had a little bit more access to things, correct? Yeah? So let's look at Floyd back there. or Stephen. Or Stephen. In many ways, African Americans feel just like this. You know, in many ways we feel just like this. So how else could I explain this to you without preaching to you, but to actually show the difference? And the disparities. What were some factors that you have never thought of before based on these questions? Was race or, yeah.
I used to work in politics, so a lot of those jobs.
It's not on.
Yeah, you want to try more? Push the button. Got it?
Better? There we go. I used to work in politics, and a lot of those jobs you apply, but it's not really publicized that they're hiring. It's, oh, so-and-so is looking for a campaign manager, you should send, what's his face, your resume. And it is very much a culture of who you know and who knows you. And I thought of that more as a culture of the industry rather than a culture of race, ethnicity, identity, power.
Anyone else? If you really look at the front row, there are really no African Americans. correct? What about the middle? I mean, people of color. This is an honest view, right? Okay, just thought I just, looking at it from this view. Okay, look around, look to your left, look to your right, look behind you. Okay, all right. So this is the reason why, and society actually impacts even our scene. So thank you all for participating. Okay. So society racism impacts our scene. In many ways, did you all feel uncomfortable by that? When you look to your left and look to your right? Yes. Who said yes? You did? Why did you feel uncomfortable, Todd?
Well, I mean, it's obviously just not just, so it's just the unjustness in your face.
Anyone else? Who else felt uncomfortable? Yes.
I think it made me realize that you always look to the people ahead of you in terms of privilege. You're never looking behind.
Correct.
I found that really powerful.
I was going to say. Anyone else? Yes.
I also felt that when I did have to take steps back, I felt shame in that, even though those things were not really truly shameful.
Okay.
But I knew that society would see them as such.
Okay. So you can imagine the person or two people that kept having to step back, correct? Yes, Stephen.
Yeah, I was uncomfortable because like I gotta admit the bullshit I gotta go through. So like it's not the same as when I'm with everybody else and be like, yeah, I've gone through some shit. Like, boy, y'all.
Right. Okay. Anyone else? Floyd?
I'm almost ashamed to say I did not feel uncomfortable due to the fact that I was used to it.
Oh, that's deep. That's deep.
But, like I said, at a certain point in my life, I learned how to move forward despite a lot of this. And if I got to use it as a springboard. Younger years and teenage years, and some places is like, wow, what's wrong with me? Why me? What am I? And then I learned, you know what? I can't look at what the they do.
Yeah.
I gotta look at what the I do, and I am gonna go forth regardless.
Okay.
So that's what.
Yeah. Anyone else? Yes.
I knew how far I was up there because 2 years ago I bought a small little home in a black community unknowingly, and seeing the disparity of my lifestyle compared to some of the people who are just I would go outside and see them just in my daily life. I was realizing where my family was growing up in a completely different community suddenly, and then now being in a different place, just where I had decided to house myself, and seeing the difference of lifestyles of what I grew up with versus what other people were experiencing.
Yeah, so I felt uncomfortable because it reminded me a lot of what I had to go through when I went dancing in Africa, in West Africa. So I was the only white guy in a village of 3 million African people. So everyone could recognize me a mile away.
Right.
And so I had to confront a lot of class issues over there. And I had to confront them every day, basically. And so, most of the time, the issue was always portrayed as, well, you're white, so you have all the things going well for you. You have the money, you have the privilege, you can go back home whenever you want to. We can't do that. And so, I was always confronted against those facts every day, no matter what I did. And this exercise reminded me of that feeling.
Yeah.
I feel like this exercise really physicalizes that there's nothing between anti-racism and racism. Not racist doesn't exist as a position, and getting you really see that because of how institutionally so many of those questions are also about policies that are in place and have been in place as societal structure that continues to, that scattered plot is continually repeated. And that if as someone who's at the front, as I am, that my job is to be anti-racist, right? Because not racist isn't truly a position when that's the playing field.
I'm going to show you a video clip. Let me ask you a question. How many of you would actually take if they saw something going on that was racially insensitive, do you honestly think that you would step in and get involved? How many of you think you would be able to do that?
Depends on the situation.
Wow. Depends on the situation? Okay. I'm going to show you a video. There's a man named John Quinones, and he has a show, well, he used to have a show on ABC called What Would You Do? And remember What Would You Do? Okay, so let me get this video. Is to show you that when you see something, you must say something. Yeah. You know, especially when it comes to racial concerns. And of course, if it's violent, no, maybe I probably wouldn't get involved either. But, and it spills off into our Lindy community. You know, when we see incidences of people having blackface or performing songs that are culturally insensitive, maybe at the times in which they were being sung, no one cared because that black community was not empowered. So, you know, there are several instances where I've seen just on social media the insensitivities that are going on within our own communities, our Lindy Hop community. And if you see something, you must say something. It doesn't matter if you're black and see it or if you're white. You know, if it's wrong, it's wrong, you know? And just like that man at the end, he says, you know, I have to get involved because when you see it, it's wrong. What else? So we're going to look at just, you know, the narratives and understandings of perspectives. When you look at old videos, how many of you will love Hell's a Poppin'? Yeah? Okay, you love the dancing. Yeah. Is there anything suspect in that video? Anyone want, I mean, I can say what I want to say, but anyone on the panel or the audience want to, like, question mark something? I mean, I love the video, I love the performance, and even a Day of the Races. Is there anything suspect there? Yes, Liz.
The costumes just make me very, very uncomfortable.
Okay, what makes you uncomfortable?
It's not something that I think anybody would have chosen for themselves. They were just, caricatures. I don't know, I didn't like them at all.
You want to answer?
Yeah, I mean, I performed it, and I dressed up as a cook, and it's all clothes that you can get at any outfit, like any store, right? So
I mean the original in the movie, the skimpy.
Well, I mean, what you said though was the costumes or things that people wouldn't choose for themselves, but people choose them for themselves every day. So I don't think that's exactly.
Not when they're not bakers.
Not when they're.
I know. I just wanted her to clarify because it's actually things that you can purchase in.
But that's not what she's talking about.
Right. Okay. So what is she talking about?
You want to bring some clarity?
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's fine.
Well, it seemed like they were chosen by white people.
Okay.
That's true.
I mean,
that's true.
And
they were
for
domestic
very
workers.
strange reasons.
Yeah.
Racist reasons.
Yeah,
Probably what it is.
racist reasons, and like the skimpy little maid outfits and things. I mean, there's no people don't wear that. I mean, they didn't wear those outfits.
Well, I mean, a chef would wear a chef's outfit,
right?
But if they were cooking,
right? Not if they were dancing.
That's my point. I just wanted you to get to the heart of it. Like that's all.
yeah, I think
I think the main point is that like the not choosing is the point, not the accessibility at a store, whether you can buy the clothes or not. And I think among many, many things in House of Poppin' that's like questionable / really racist is the idea that like these like the very tip top best performers in Lindy Hop, the best Lindy Hop performance that ever happened, they didn't do it in the suits that they wore at the Savoy Ballroom.
Absolutely.
They did it in like domestic workers' outfits, and that is because the people in charge said, well, if black people are going to be on screen, they got to look like servants, and that was not their choice. That's why someone like the Nicholas brothers stand out so distinctly, because they're in tops and tails, and you're like, wow, that looks really classy. Man, that's really unique. And there's a reason it's unique, because almost all the time they made black people dress in these things that were like perfectly respectable outfits, of course, but in the context of these great performers dressing like a chef. They're not a chef. They're a great dancer. They should be able to dress like that, and of course they weren't given that chance. So that the context is what's so important.
Right, the context is important. So now we're gonna bring it to 2019 when people do reenactments, and people teach it in school. So as I'm teaching Lindy Hop to my students, I also go through the history of the Great Migration, and I also go through the history of the Harlem Renaissance, and I also speak about segregation and Jim Crow, and why that video would be problematic if you show it to a class of students and they would just see, I would show them the Savoy scenes, and then I would show them this, and they would question, well, why are they dressed like this? But did they work in the, were they maids and cooks, and even the band members had to wear like taxi driver outfits and stuff like that.
Well, they're all supposed to not be band members or dancers. It was
Correct.
they just happened to pick up
Just
these things
ha-
and they
just
could play.
happy people.
And the drums played, and oh my God, they had to dance.
Well, like to on point, like with the caricature aspect. I mean, I don't know what caricatures they would be portraying particularly, because one thing I look at like with 2019 and things like that is how Jim Crow caricatures are still kind of portrayed today and it's still intertwined in our culture. So one thing I would say to kind of look into that is look up the Ferris State Jim Crow Museum. They actually have a website with a bunch of different pages of different names of caricatures that they had for African Americans that spread like pretty much white supremacist propaganda of how they portray blacks in media. But like the issue is like these are world-class dancers and musicians, but they're being portrayed as the help. But the biggest problematic thing I think with the been in the scene is they see a bunch of white people like clapping for them. They run off because they're getting scared because, oh, we weren't working. So it's kind of like the lazy worker attitude, or, oh, they're just good and happy just working, but we just gotta, encourage them to get to work every now and again. There's a whole other thing that's overlaid with that as like, as I can't remember what the name of the character is, but I know if you look up on like Ferris State Jim Crow Museum, they literally have a whole page just on caricatures, and they go through them one by one and what they meant and how they were portrayed in media. Which is one thing to kind of get a grasp on why a lot of the media, other classic clips can be, there's good dancing, but there's very problematic cultural things that we kind of regurgitate today even.
So we have to be careful in our scene when we're actually looking at period pieces, or and the context is very important, and you have to share that. And I'm bringing it to 2019 because we don't want to bring those negativity to the future. Okay.
Can I throw one thing out there?
Sure.
I'm talking too much. I'm so sorry.
That's fine,
But
Peter.
we did, but we specifically had a clip night at home, and what I realized is I really wanted my students. One of the reasons that I wanted to show the old clips is I was like, hey, watch these amazing dancers do this. P.S. They are black. And because if you see the demographic of people doing it today, you might just assume it's a white dance. I didn't know it was a black dance when I started. And so it wasn't until Frankie came that I understood that, so I wanted to show that to sort of give some of the cultural understanding. The problem is so much of our sacred texts, these videos, these clips, they're tainted with so much racism, right? So you can't take them in unalloyed, or you could. And so what I realize is if I'm showing these to my students, they may, in a very innocent or ignorant or whatever you would call it, they might miss those layers. There's many different layers of House of Hop that are kind of racist, underneath which there's the greatest Lindy Hop that you ever see. And so we just wrote a little blurb that said like, here's a note on watching old clips, and it just says like, they're often racist. You should just take a look at that, try to make sure you're looking at the dancing. Don't just take it in flat, like look at the layers, take off a couple layers that you don't want to take in, and then take the dancing part. And I think I would just like, I think people probably know that. I think, especially if you're engaged enough to be at Beantown, but you know, if you teach or something around your new students, they really might not know. And I've seen many people make like just things that I would feel like are mistakes or things I think are uncomfortable or like not really, or they're kind of not right racially, or they make like little transgressions that they don't know they're making. And I think in some ways that is our job as educators to say like, hey, this is a great clip, but I can't give it to you with no context. I have to let you know that they didn't dress in servants' outfits all the time. It wasn't like when you play drums that they had to go dance because they couldn't stop themselves. It wasn't that like when white people were watching then they ran away. You know, to just provide a little bit of that context, it takes a little more time, but I really think it makes a big difference. And I think that's one of the things that could maybe make fewer of those like blackface performances or dancing to some weird song that is kind of racist that people, if people knew a little more going in, maybe that would happen less often. And since we have so many people who probably will teach a little bit at home around here.
And it's not an excuse also that you're international.
Right.
Yeah.
That's not an
Okay,
excuse,
because
no.
we are living in the World Wide Web age.
One of the
And
things with that was one of the main things that I've become a little bit more appreciative of is when I discovered this dance, or we discovered it rather, the context was just that we were looking at the dancing for the purpose of incorporating into an urban dance piece called We Got the Jazz. And we're like, oh, here's a clip of some black dancers doing that dance. Not the pioneers of these dances doing the dance. That was the context with which we as black dancers in 2011 were looking at those clips. And in the clips themselves, there was no contextual, well, it was the name of the group, the name of the film, the year. Not, these are the pioneers of the African-American dance, Lindy Hop. So that's a little bit of a broader issue that many people, many of us who engage with these clips, we go and watch them all the time. How many of you have ever written to the people who own these clips on YouTube and written to them and asked them to change the text?
Oh man, oh gosh, that's a that.
How many of you have ever engaged that other than liking it or commenting, oh, look at the step at 3 minutes, 39 seconds. Yeah, that's great and wonderful. We need to be engaging with these people to make sure that this context is continued so that those who come behind us don't have the same issues that we did coming into this. And particularly with large events like Beantown, like Harang, the responsibility of communicating that context is on those organizers. And that needs to be clear. And if it's not made clear, you will have those of us who will interrupt you in the middle of your showcasing to make sure that it is made clear, just so you can know right now. That will happen.
One of my students, my kids bring me all kinds of stuff. They say, if you Google swing dance, there's a bunch of white people. And I'm like, if you Google Lindy Hop, there's a bunch of white people. And I'm saying, Google black Lindy Hop. And then they Google black Lindy Hop, and then you'll see black people. So it's a little bit like, so how do we change? This is 2019. Again, we're bringing the racial part, to 2019. We're not looking at the past, but currently, how do we change that? Like, how can we, this is cultural appropriation in the digital sense, and it's a little dangerous, when you look at it. And how do you explain that to your, these minds that are impressionable, and how do you explain to them that this is a systematic form of racism? Yes. Yes.
I'm gonna try my best to keep this short. I'm a nerd, so I read a lot. And a couple of the studies I was reading have to do with African Americans in mathematics, specifically, and mathematics jobs. And I swear this is connected. Basically what I'm studying is about how the buildup of microaggressions can break somebody. And even if they are a person who is naturally gifted at math, they would leave that so that our numbers in mathematics of representation are very, very low. So these studies over the course of like, I don't know, 30 years or something ridiculous, were contacting African American people who remained in these positions to ask them, how did this happen? Oh, okay. And the results of this study were kind of staggering to me. That, like, I don't know, I'm gonna make up a number because I can't remember, but like, it was something like 85% of the people who were in a mathematics career, somewhere in their lifetime, they had acknowledged these microaggressions and then decided that they would be successful in spite of all of that stuff. And that sounds really motivating to hear, right? It does. But the thing is that not everybody can do that. So you're like, okay, 85% of the African Americans who are successful were only successful because they had a specific kind of resilience, which is the word that they're using for that. However, there's only like 12% of African Americans in the field. So you think about all the people who didn't have the support to create that resilience that were lost to that particular field. And it was interesting because I thought about swing dancing immediately. Immediately.
Yes.
How many of us, how many people of color are here, continue now? Because in our own lives, myself included, I was like, well, F it. I'm gonna do this in spite of this thing that's pushing me down.
Yep.
And think about how many of us who have people of color of our friends that did not have that resilience and have left the field. A lot. I feel like if we're thinking about what we're gonna do now, it has to be something that's long term. So that we're not just forcing people, we're not just forcing the Black people who can muster the resilience to stay. How do we get everybody else? That's really my question.
I know, like, going to, like, what Dee's saying, like, a simple thing is just to listen. I think people just to listen, honestly, and it's like, I think all of us can say that we've probably said that a lot to people in conversations like these, but it's frustrating seeing discussions like this happen on Facebook. If anyone like follows me on Facebook, it's a whirlwind sometimes, but I'll challenge people openly. Like my page is public, and though you can just follow me and see any of my posts, because I like just host inquiries or share my opinions. Alex knows he spends way too much time with me, and you're starting to talk like me, it's making me worried. But a lot of times I get frustrated seeing people like Chizoma or one of our mutual friends, Stephanie, who's very qualified in sociological studies. I read a lot on psychology and sociology, where we can write a dissertation, cite our sources in a conversation, but we still have to prove our credibility when somebody else who's nowhere near as educated can just bleep, bloop, bloop, two sentences that make no cohesive sense, but everybody backs the two sentences. It's frustrating. It's frustrating. I've been dealing with, I've been really openly speaking out for probably about 3 years now, and it's just happened again and again and again when the writing's against the wall that there's problems in this scene. And I'm thankful to have people on this panel to look to for encouragement. I'm thankful to have people in, I have a separate Facebook, I think two separate Facebook groups. Trent, you're in 2 of them, of friends where we can just have a place to vent and just be able to keep going. But it's eventually at some point, it's people need to actually hear and actually accept the credibility. Because every one of us sitting up here is credible. We're more than credible. We have, a lot of us talk about the things we're doing in our home scene to prove it. And I think if you come to a situation where you feel like you have to question somebody, I think that's the time where you really need to most likely keep your mouth shut or be very mindful of your question. Because like we have not only just us, there's a lot of dancers of color, a lot of very bright people in this scene who are trying to do good, but we have to fight more to prove ourselves over people who don't really have the standing. So I think like with that, like talking about using privilege that people have, use that to back up and to lift those up who are credible to be able to speak to these issues and back those people up. Because unfortunately, without y'all, like we were not going to make any progress. And if y'all who have that privilege and have the power and in a position to do so, you need to use that to push the qualified voices forward. Like honestly, I'm a prideful person. I'm just going to say that up front. I hate the fact that I have to ask for help. I would love to be able to do all this on my own. I'm sure Tasha's the same way. I'm sure Josh is the same way. I'm sure Sam is the same way. Chisoma's the same way. But we need help. Like, there's just a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that isn't happening. I'm mad. I'm frustrated. I love this scene. I love this dance. I love this music. And sometimes I ask, I don't think I'm going to make it to 10 years because of a lot of it. I would love to dance for 20 years. But it's very, very hard for me to make it sometimes day by day for some stretches. So please, if you have a shred of influence, a shred of social power in your community, please back the voices that are speaking on behalf of those who are like oppressed, on fact of people of color, fact of non-gender binary people, like anybody. Well, in this case, like, mostly like people of color and African Americans. Push those voices forward as much as you can. And there's easy ways to figure these things out.
Which you probably were the same. We need a coalition of people that are, okay. We need a coalition of people. Honestly, it's not about us. It's about others, and their roles on the scene and their power. It's not only our fight, and we're the ones that are pushing in, for a dance that was historically, ours. We're asking permission to come back. Yeah. And that's like, that's kind of just saying that is like hurtful. Like I'm asking permission to come back to my own dance,
And that's one of the things where I think, and I'm sorry if interjecting something else I want to share, specifically after this past 2 years of research, and especially talking with Norma and Mickey Davidson and Angela Andrews and so many other pioneers and available Black mentors in the scene, if you don't know them. That's one of the things, a little bit in concert with what Dee was saying and also what Floyd was saying, those who know my background and my history and the things that I've had to deal with, the vast majority of it has been in spite of, including my involvement and presence in the Lindy Hop community in and of itself. So I recognized, and I shared this with Peter, who I called several times when I was frustrated and panic-stricken and drinking at the bar because of some existential crisis during the middle of my thesis research. But I recognized very emotionally, there's really no other way for me to say this, and it may rub some of y'all the wrong way. I don't need to ask somebody for shit. I'm here because I want to be here, and yes, that's in spite of, and yes, sadly, because of the things that I went through, I had to develop that sense of resiliency. But also because of that, I recognize now my privilege, which is not something a lot of Black people like to, a word that we like to use. But those of us who are still here do have a privileged position. Yeah. And we need to start using that, not to uplift just anybody just because they're Black, but to showcase and present the opportunity that there is space for us here. And that if you do the work and do show up for each other, regardless of where you are in the so-called hierarchy, whether you want to acknowledge it or not, that this is a place for all of us to be and share. And that is one of the steps that we all need to take to develop that long-term plan. We don't need to wait on anybody else to do that. Talking to each other, being in support of each other, calling each other out when you're venting about some BS and just need to go in the shed and practice. Actually helping each other figure out how to better talk about your skill sets that you can bring to an event so that you can get hired in certain capacities. You might not be of the temperament that you need to be a teacher. You might need to be a choreographer. Some of the greatest, most famous people are songwriters that you probably don't even know of, and they've been in support of the people that you love the most. There's nothing wrong with that. The people up front have a whole lot of other world of shit to deal with that you might not even be equipped for. So stop thinking that somebody has it better than you all the time. This is one of the conditioned mindsets that we have to break out of. Yes, it is easy to look at the people in front of us and be like, oh, well, I don't get to do this and I don't get to do that. There's not enough of us here. There's not enough of us there. You're right. Yeah. You're right. But until we continue to stand in this place and show people that they can be here too, and bring someone up to take your place, that's not going to change. And until we start mentoring each other in a very real way, that is not going to change. We keep trying to come up with all these formats and conversations and things, and really the thing that needs to happen is we just need to actually help each other, period. African Americans, people of color, we need to be helping each other. When you can get support, that is great and amazing. But we just need, I say it all the time, and everybody laughs at me when I say it, because I know I'm hyper-expressive. We need to show the fuck up.
Ronald has something to say already. Come on over. Uncle Ron. Oh, it's your someone next.
Usually, I don't say nothing. I let you do all the talking. Because I'm not going to change your mind anyway. But this is what we do. I hear what Tasha's saying, but one thing that Julia and I got together is we threw dances once a month in Harlem at the National Black Theater. A theater that was built Okay, so we had the National Black Theater, which was formed in Harlem to showcase black talent, right? One day Julia and I got together, we said, well, everyone talked about it. We did it. And we didn't go begging anybody to do it. We put our little few ducats together, and we got the place. Julia knew the guy, we got it. I realized the equipment I had wasn't enough, so I invested in the proper equipment we need. Like my equipment can fill the joint up, okay? But we pushed it, and we didn't beg for it. And our premise was, if you had a place with good music and people having fun, people will come. And the Sephora Ballroom was an example of that. It was in Harlem. It was laying happy feet. Black people was dancing, having a good time. Other communities came because they wanted to have a good time. They wanted to learn that dance. And getting back to quickly about the uniform and how's it popping, that's what Hollywood wanted you to see of white Lenny Hoppers. But that's not how they portrayed themselves, because the classic picture of them is sharp with these white suits on, clean. That's how they presented themselves. That's how they saw themselves, not how Hollywood saw them. And that picture you don't see spread all over the world. You see all that hell's popping with the little dress on and the nurses stuff, but you don't see that. And that's who they thought they were. And that's a very important fact. But getting back to Julia, I'm not talking no more.
So Latasha was talking about conditioned mindset, and this experience right here has been multifaceted, and it's been multifaceted in our emotional relationship, right? So there have been moments of dissonance and discomfort, which is good, right? As we talk about the conditioned mindset, the reason why we did the privilege walk, the reason why we watched this clip, the reason why we're having this conversation is to bring awareness to what it is that we think in our everyday experience. So speaking from our particular nerdy perspectives, I'm a speech pathologist, a faculty member at Baldwin Wallace University, and I recently was on a panel, an international panel, that I brought together from people from Africa so that the voices of Africa could speak for themselves, because that's something we also don't see happening in our field. And so we have people who want to tell other people what to do when they can speak for themselves. So we were talking about epistemology, how it is that we come to know what it is that we know. And so Latasha was talking about conditioned mindsets, the way that we are set to think We need to question this. And this conversation is not just relevant here, it's relevant in the international context. And there's so many conversations that happen, and here's my general posturing towards the world. I have things to say, and I will step in if need be. Anyone who's been in a social media group with me when the shit has gone down and somebody needs to step in, I will do it, but most of the time I'm quiet. So I've observed a lot, and what I've seen is that we've had conversations with our friends in other parts of the world, and we want to excuse behavior because they don't understand racism as it exists here. It might manifest differently here, but it exists internationally. And you know why? Because if you look at a map of the world, there's a particular map of the world with like essentially 5 white dots on it. Do you know what those 5 small white dots are? The only places where the UK, where Britain never colonized those environments. So the entire world, you've probably heard the saying, the sun never set on the British Empire. There are things that we have taken from that. The way that we structure our educational systems, the way that we understand what is valuable has been given to us through colonization. All of us, internationally, not just in the United States, not just in Africa, in Europe, in Australia, all over the world. Are we tracking?
Yes.
Yeah. So this conversation continues to be relevant even beyond today. I know you might be uncomfortable. I know some of you have checked out. I know some of you probably think like, okay, well, I'm glad that this is a time that Black people get a chance to talk about stuff. I'm glad I've got to witness this. Don't just take that. Take it and realize that this is a living, breathing thing, and you're a part of this conversation, and you're a valuable part of this conversation, and we need to push it forward.
Thank you very much. I just want to say thank you all for sharing, for being a part of this, moving inclusivity forward. We do have an elder in the house. Mr. Phil, do you have anything? Because, you know, we're in a communal circle right now. So we always ask our elders permission to end events. So.
It's all been said, and I think last year I tried to.
Hold on, we're going to give you a mic. Yes, you ended it perfectly for us last year. Yes.
But I think this year, the significance to me is that it's expanding and growing. And I was stressing last year that the word that was kind of overworked and tired was diversity. And I'm liking more and more hearing the word inclusivity. And that was where I kind of topped off what you're doing and continuing to do well. And I think engaging more people as you are. And again, I think the other thing I said last time, I'll say it again this time, is having the conversation. You got to talk about it and get in each other's face and talk about these things. And it's not easy to do. And sometimes you don't want to. And as we saw that little clip that I remembered seeing it, where you got to speak up and say something when you see something's wrong. That ain't always easy to do. It's just not. It's just not. But that's what we got to do to overcome some of this. And I just think you guys are doing a wonderful job. And I'm glad to see this is a repeat situation. And let's keep it going and spread it around so all of us. So we just don't have Julia doing it, but all of us in our own little small way do a little bit more, take a little bigger step to make it work, to better and have this conversation and get in each other's face. That's all.
Josh, you could, okay.
Yeah.
We were supposed to end it with Mr. Phil, but I'm going to allow you this privilege.
Thank you so much.
Because you are
Appreciate it.
definitely breaking protocol.
I'm so sorry. I gave the mic. Talking about this effect of colonized mindsets and breaking out of that. And you know, I'm not saying this to say like I'm breaking out of I have broken out of my colonized mindset. But you know, it was Latasha also who I'm in the process. You know, I've been on both sides of the water. I've been that angry person on Facebook shouting at people, you know, and I, you know, haven't always looked at the overarching issue to realize that that isn't really effective. It really isn't. You know, also, I've been a young person in this community, and I've had to say this for many people. Many people have told me, you should sound more like Frankie. He was very nice. I'm like, let me tell you something. I was born in 1994, the same year the triple strike rule was put into place. The year where the prison population of black men tripled into the millions. Okay? You know, my mom rose me up, you know, when she was more well, telling me things from 5 years old. Morehouse or the jailhouse. Morehouse or not my house. To put it into my mind that I had to succeed from 5 years old, right? So when I come at 17 years old, an apathetic teenager, struggling in school, and I happen to discover Lindy Hop, and I'm like, here's a shining thing in my life that is less shitty than everything else I've experienced. I don't have no idea if it's gonna take me anywhere, but I'm gonna latch on to that, right? Me, coming from my background and my mindset, you know, and also, I would say, my traumas, coming into this community, it's been extremely difficult to suss out the good from the bullshit. Sometimes, right? Sometimes it's easy to, sometimes it's really, really hard, right? And one of the things that I think also we've talked about awareness, we've talked about having a conversation, there's also the reality to hold to ourselves that if you're a black person in this community, unless you can break all of the barriers of access that are out there and make a specific effort to be with another black person, who are most of the people that you have to interact with in this community? Yeah? You know, part of the reason why Hello Black Lindy Hop exists, not the dance team. The dance team is one half of the picture, you know? The other half of the other parts of the picture are social media, right? I wanted to create a media where you see exclusively black people, not to exclude everyone, but also to just say, hey, if another black kid comes to this community, at least they can see more than the one male black professional I saw that inspired me to think, oh, I could do that too, right? Also, it's a collective. I did introduce myself as the artistic director, but Latasha talked about our gig in New York. I didn't direct that. That's all her. You know, I know for us, like it's kind of been, for me, it's been a grand experiment that I'm realizing I like this a lot, because this is taught me, like, here is just working with Hello Black Lindy Hop, you know, being connected with each other has taught me, like, this is what I want to have happening, you know, and I've said this before to a few people, you know, we can't have an integrated community until we have, in this context, a strong black community. We have to have one for the other, right? And so there's, in my opinion, there's kind of an equal opportunity, right? There's a path of work from one half, and there's a path of work and understanding from the other.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah?
That's good.
And if not, who goes first? It just needs to happen. It just needs to happen.
Say real quick.
Okay, this is going to connect to what Josh said, I promise. So I just wanted to thank Tony and Orly for Beantown this year, specifically because of the fact that, going back to the very beginning, right? Like, what have we been working on since last year, right? This year at Beantown, if you haven't noticed, we have 5 black instructors, and that's actually really amazing in terms of the Lindy community, right? Because usually just one person gets hired, and it's like, great, and remember the 21 questions? It's like, awesome, like that box got checked of like, am I hiring that instructor? Yes, and they check that and they go, great, I can disregard everything else, I've done that, like, we did our job, we can go home, right? We hired that one instructor, right? So that kind of token, you know, like this thing is very,
I said that was my
still
son.
alive, right? Also DJs, yeah, as well. So, you know, that mentality, you think it's, you know, kind of it's old and it's kind of dead, but that's still very much alive, right? And going back to what Josh said of like, you know, giving people like one more Black person to look up to, right? And then building that community from that, you know. So yeah, I just wanted to close with that.
I love you, Brandon.
Love you, Mama Julia.
Okay. So, Mr. Phil, do we have permission to end?
I think you concluded it with some very good remarks, and I'm very proud of all of you. And I also want to throw some bouquets over to Tony and Arlie.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Arlie. All right. I guess now it's time to enjoy, right? But take this home with you all. Ponder it. You know, I'm not saying right out the door, he's like, I'm going to hire this person. But ponder it. Thank you very much. The elder is spoken.